Book 2, Chapter 10, on the virtue of justice in Most Holy Mary. The great virtue of justice is that which most serves charity toward both God and neighbor, and is therefore the most necessary for human preservation and interaction. Justice is a habit that inclines the will to give to each what is due. Its matter and object is the equality or rectitude that should be observed toward others and toward God himself. Since there are many ways in which a person can maintain or violate this equality toward others, through a wide variety of means, the field of justice is vast and diffuse, with many kinds and species. When it is directed toward the public or common good, it is called legal justice, and is considered a general virtue, insofar as it orders all the other virtues toward this end, though it does not share their individual natures. When justice pertains to particular matters and individuals, ensuring that each receives what is personally due, it is called particular or special justice. This entire virtue, with all its parts and species, the Empress of the world practiced with all creatures more perfectly than any other, for she alone understood more deeply and comprehensively what was due to each one. Although justice does not directly concern the control of natural passions, still it is often lost because of disordered passions, like when people, driven by greed or sensual pleasure, unjustly seize what belongs to others. But in Mary Most Holy, since there were no disordered passions, nor any ignorance of the proper measure in matters of justice, she fulfilled it toward all, always acting with utmost justice, and teaching others to do the same whenever they were worthy of hearing her words and doctrine. Regarding legal justice, she not only observed all the common laws, such as in her purification and other mandates of the law, but no one, aside from her divine Son, has cared as much for the public and common good of mortals as this Mother of Mercy, who directed all her virtues and actions to this goal, meriting divine mercy and benefiting others through many acts of justice. The two chief species of justice, distributive and commutative, were also present in Mary in heroic degree. Distributive justice governs the allocation of common goods to individuals. Mary practiced this with great fairness, particularly among the early church faithful, when goods were shared for sustenance and other needs. Though she never handled money herself, distribution was carried out at her direction or through her counsel. She always observed strict equity according to the needs and conditions of each person. The same was true in assigning offices, dignities, or ministries among the disciples and the first children of the gospel in assemblies or gatherings. This most wise teacher arranged all things with perfect equity, aided by special prayer and divine illumination, in addition to her natural and infused knowledge of each individual. Thus the apostles consulted her in these matters, and others in authority sought her counsel. Everything governed under her guidance was executed with complete justice and without favoritism. Commutative justice requires reciprocal fairness in exchanges between individuals, like giving 2 for 2 or an equivalent value. Mary had less occasion to exercise this form of justice, for she never personally bought or sold anything. If anything needed to be purchased, Saint Joseph handled it during his life, and later Saint John the Evangelist or one of the other apostles took care of it. The Master of Holiness, who came to destroy and uproot greed, the root of all evil, 1 Timothy 6 verse 10, wished to keep such commercial dealings entirely away from himself and his most holy mother. Therefore, divine providence ordained that neither of them would engage in buying and selling, even for life's necessities. Nonetheless, the great queen still taught all that pertained to commutative justice, so that those in the apostolate and early church could practice it perfectly. This virtue also encompasses judgments made in public or private, either in civil court or in personal decisions. Against rash judgment the Lord warned, saying through St. Matthew, 7:1, "Judge not, lest you be judged." These judgments involve assigning what is due to each person according to the judge's estimation. They are just if conformed to reason. Otherwise, they become injustice. Though Mary never exercised civil judgment, she possessed the authority to be judge of the entire universe. Yet, through her most righteous counsel during her earthly life, and later through her intercession and merits, she fulfilled the words of Proverbs 8 verses 20 and 16. I walk in the way of justice. By me princes rule and nobles govern justly. In private judgments, there was never any injustice in Mary's most pure heart. She was never quick to suspect, never rash in judgment, never prone to doubt, and even if she had doubts, she would never interpret them harshly. These vicious tendencies, suspecting evil with little cause, rash judgment, or interpreting doubt in the worst light, are common among the children of Adam, where disordered passions like hatred, envy, and malice reign. People often presume in others the very faults they tolerate in themselves. If they are resentful of another's good or glad at their misfortune, they readily believe what they desire to be true, allowing judgment to follow affection. Mary, being utterly free from sin, knew nothing of such disorder. Her heart was full of charity, purity, holiness, and perfect love. She was filled with the grace of all truth, sir. 2400 hours 25, and the path of life. With her fullness of knowledge and holiness, she neither doubted nor suspected evil. She saw and judged all interior movements with clarity and mercy, never imputing guilt where there was none, and always ready to remedy faults and dispense to all the just measure due to each, ever prepared, with a gentle heart, to fill all people with the sweetness and grace of virtue. Within distributive and commutative justice lie many sub-virtues and distinctions which I will not recount in full. Suffice it to say that Mary possessed them all in supreme and excellent acts and habits. There are other virtues related to justice which involve interaction with others and share something of its nature, even if not entirely. This is because we cannot always repay what we owe in full, or because the obligation is not as strict as that required by perfect commutative or distributive justice. Though they are many and varied, I will mention some briefly, so that it may be understood how our sovereign and most exalted princess possessed them all. A just debt is to give honor and reverence to our superiors. According to their dignity and the benefits we receive from them, our obligation and the homage we owe increases, though it can never match what is deserved. 3 virtues address this in relation to 3 types of superiority. First is the virtue of religion, by which we give God the reverence due to him, although his greatness is infinite and his gifts beyond repayment. Among mortal virtues, religion is the noblest due to its object, God himself, and the breadth of its matter, which includes all the ways and means by which God can be honored and revered. This includes interior acts like prayer, contemplation, and devotion, and exterior acts like latria, along with sacrifices, offerings, tithes, vows, oaths, and vocal praise. When properly performed, these acts honor God. When violated, they offend him greatly. Second is the virtue of piety, by which we reverence our parents, who, after God, gave us life and education, and also our relatives and homeland. This virtue is so significant that it takes precedence, when necessary, over acts of supererogation in the virtue of religion. Christ taught this when he rebuked the Pharisees for forsaking their parents under the pretext of honoring God. Matt 15:3ff. Third is the virtue of observance, by which we honor those of superior dignity who are not our parents. Under this fall 2 related virtues: dulia, which reverences those who share in God's authority, and obedience, which submits our will to our superiors. Obedience is especially admirable, for it surrenders one's precious freedom entirely to God. These virtues, religion, piety, and observance, were present in Mary with such fullness and perfection that nothing was lacking that could be possible for a pure creature. What mind could comprehend the honor, reverence, and worship with which she served her beloved Son, knowing and adoring him as true God and true man, Creator, Redeemer, Glorifier, the infinite and eternal One in all his attributes? Among creatures, she knew him best, and accordingly rendered him the highest reverence, even teaching the seraphim themselves. Just by her presence, she silently stirred hearts to reverence their Creator. Her prayer, contemplation, and devotions, and the efficacy of her petitions, are known in eternal admiration by all the angels and saints, though no one can fully explain them. All rational creatures owe her for what she has made up, not only for our offenses, but for what we could never accomplish or merit on our own. She hastened the world's redemption, and if she had not been in the world, the Word might not have descended from the bosom of the Eternal Father. From her first instant, She surpassed even the seraphim in contemplation, prayer, and divine readiness. She offered sacrifices, oblations, and tithes in a way supremely pleasing to God. Her hymns, canticles, and vocal prayers surpassed those of all patriarchs and prophets. And if the militant church had access to them, as the church triumphant now does, they would be the admiration of the world. The virtues of piety and observance were present in her majesty, as in one who most perfectly understood her obligations to her parents and most deeply recognized their heroic holiness. She extended this piety to her relatives, filling them with special graces, as she did with John the Baptist and his mother Saint Elizabeth, and also with the rest of the apostolic community. To her homeland, had it not forfeited its blessing through the ingratitude and hardness of the Jews, she would have made it supremely blessed. Nonetheless, to the extent that divine justice allowed, she conferred upon it great spiritual and visible favors. Her reverence for priests was extraordinary, as she alone could fully understand the dignity of the anointed ones of the Lord. She taught this reverence to all, and also instructed others to venerate the patriarchs, prophets, saints, and afterward, temporal lords and rulers in positions of authority. She left no act of these virtues unfulfilled, exercising and teaching them on various occasions, especially to the first believers at the dawn of the evangelical church. Though she no longer obeyed her son or her husband in person, she obeyed the ministers of the church, thus providing a new example of obedience to the world. At that time, all creation owed her this obedience in a special way, as she remained among them as their sovereign and queen. Other virtues also fall under justice, whereby we give others what is morally due to them, even when not bound by strict legal obligation, but by honorable and fitting reasons. These include gratitude, truthfulness, vindication, liberality, and friendship or affability. Gratitude is the virtue by which we strive for some equality with those who have benefited us, offering thanks proportionate to the benefit and to the rank or dignity of the benefactor. Truthfulness inclines us to speak the truth in our dealings with others, as is proper to human life and social interaction. It excludes all falsehood. Under no circumstance is lying permitted, as well as deception, hypocrisy, boasting, and irony. Although we may rightly downplay our own virtues to avoid boasting, it is not just to falsely accuse ourselves of faults we do not have. Vindication is the virtue by which we restore justice or compensate for harm done to oneself or others. This is a difficult virtue for mortals, who are often motivated by uncontrolled anger or hatred, leading to a failure in both justice and charity. But when vindication seeks not vengeance, but the correction of wrongdoing or the good of others, it becomes a true virtue, such as when Christ drove the merchants from the temple, John 2 verse 15, or when Elijah and Elisha called down fire from heaven, or as Proverbs says, Prov. 13:24, he who spares the rod hates his son. Liberality governs the rightful distribution of money and possessions, avoiding both greed and wastefulness. Affability or friendship is the virtue by which we engage with others in appropriate, gentle interaction, avoiding quarrels and flattery. None of these virtues, or any other related to justice, was lacking in the Queen of Heaven. She possessed them all in full and perfect form, exercising them in the most excellent ways whenever the occasion arose. She enlightened and taught many souls to practice these virtues with perfection, as their teacher and mistress of all holiness. Her gratitude to God was expressed in acts of worship and devotion, as previously mentioned, since this is the highest form of thanksgiving. Because her dignity and sanctity far surpassed all understanding, her return of gratitude was proportionally immense, so far as was possible to a created being. She showed the same gratitude in her piety toward her parents and her homeland, as already described. Toward others, the most humble empress expressed thanks for every benefit, as if none were owed to her. Even when all was due her by justice, she still gave thanks with great grace and favor. She alone was able and worthy to give thanks even for injuries and offenses, regarding them as great blessings. Her unparalleled humility never recognized an insult and considered herself indebted for everything. Since she never forgot a benefit, her gratitude was unceasing. As for truthfulness, everything that can be said will fall short. She who stood so far above the devil, the father of lies and deception, could not harbor such a despicable vice. The standard by which to measure her virtue of truth is her charity and dove-like simplicity, which excluded all deceit and duplicity in her dealings with others. How could there be falsehood or deceit in the mouth of her who, by a word of true humility, conceived in her womb him who is truth and holiness itself? She practiced the virtue of vindication in many perfect acts, not only as a teacher instructing others when needed in the early church, but also through her own care for the honor of the Most High, working to convert sinners through correction, as she did repeatedly with Judas. She even commanded creatures who were obedient to her to inflict chastisements for sin when this was the best means of purification. And although she always acted with the utmost sweetness, she never withheld punishment when it was the most effective remedy. Her most frequent and potent acts of vindication were against the devil, in order to free the human race from his tyranny. The sovereign queen also exercised the virtues of liberality and affability to the highest degree. Her generosity in giving and distributing reflected her status as supreme empress of all creation, and her perfect understanding of the worth of both visible and invisible goods. She never regarded anything in her possession as more hers than others, and never denied anything to anyone. She did not wait to be asked, but took the initiative in giving. The number of poor she helped, the blessings she bestowed, and the mercies she poured out, even in temporal matters, could fill volumes. Her affability was so unique and admirable. Had she not tempered it with rare prudence, the entire world would have flocked to her, drawn by her sweet and gentle manner. Her meekness and softness, infused with divine wisdom and severity, revealed glimpses of more than mere humanity. The Lord disposed this grace in his spouse so wisely that when those who encountered her began to perceive the hidden mystery within her, the veil was drawn back again, lest her glory interrupt her path of suffering or draw the applause of men. Since no mortal could properly revere the mother of the Creator as a creature, this mystery remained hidden until the children of the Church were enlightened by Christian and Catholic faith. To ensure the most perfect and fitting use of the virtue of justice, the doctors identify an additional aspect or instrument called epikeia, by which we judge how to act when circumstances fall outside normal rules or laws. Since no legislation can foresee every situation, epikeia permits recourse to a higher rule of reason in exceptional cases. The sovereign queen needed and used this virtue on many occasions throughout her most holy life, both before and after the ascension of her only begotten Son into heaven, and especially afterward, in helping to establish the early Church, as I will explain later, if the Lord permits. Doctrine of the Queen of Heaven. My daughter, although you have now come to understand something of the worth of this vast virtue of justice, much remains hidden to you because of the limitations of mortal flesh, nor can words ever fully express its meaning. Yet within this virtue you will find a rich guide for how to interact with creatures and how to worship the Most High. And I warn you, dearest, that the supreme majesty of the Almighty is justly indignant when mortals forget the veneration, adoration, and reverence due to him. Even when some homage is offered, it is often so coarse, careless, and irreverent that it merits punishment rather than reward. Worldly rulers are honored deeply, their favors sought through tireless efforts, and people offer them thanks with lifelong promises of loyalty. But the Supreme Lord, who gives them being, life, and breath, who sustains and redeems them, who raises them to the dignity of his children and desires to share his own glory, this infinite and supreme good, is forgotten simply because he is not seen with bodily eyes. People are content, at best, with a hurried gesture or half-hearted gratitude. And this does not even mention those who openly trample justice in their dealings with others, perverting all natural reason by desiring for their neighbors what they would never wish for themselves. Abhor, my daughter, these execrable vices. As far as your strength allows, make reparation through your works for the neglect shown toward the Most High by so many. Since your vocation dedicates you to his divine service, let that be your main pursuit and desire, imitating the holy angels who unceasingly worship and adore him. Show reverence for all sacred and divine things, even for the vestments and vessels used in liturgy. In the divine office, prayer, and sacrifice, remain always on your knees. Ask in faith, receive with humble gratitude, and give thanks always to God and to all creatures, even those who offend you. Be merciful, gentle, kind, simple, and truthful with everyone, without deceit or duplicity, without gossip or rash judgment. To fulfill this obligation of justice, always keep in mind and desire to treat others as you would wish to be treated. Above all, remember what my most holy Son did, and what I did in imitation of him for all humanity.